Welcome, everyone. We're doing a deep dive today into a really unique conversation.
Yeah, the source material features this guest, who's just this fascinating mix, isn't he? Like, total extremes.
Totally. An elite, ultra-endurance athlete on one hand, and then a world-renowned mentalist on the other.
It feels like two completely different people, almost.
Yeah.
But this conversation we're digging into, it actually finds these really surprising links between them.
Absolutely. So our mission here is to unpack all of this. We want to understand the mindset behind those, insane physical feats.
And also the real techniques behind what looks like reading minds.
Right. And crucially, figure out how the lessons from both these worlds might actually apply to your life. There are some genuinely unique insights and takeaways here.
And we should probably mention up front, during the original chat, there are these demonstrations he did, things that seemed kind of impossible.
Oh, yeah. Like predicting specific thoughts we had, actions we took, stuff he apparently wrote down and sealed in envelopes before we even started talking.
We'll definitely get into those later. They really make you think.
Okay, so let's start with the physical side first, the ultra-endurance stuff. I mean, just to set the scene, this guy ran a marathon.
Right before the conversation.
A full marathon, 26.2 miles in that Southeast Austin heat, too. Clocked in around, 3.25, 3.3?
Yeah, something like that. And, that wasn't even unusual for him. He runs daily, sometimes 20 miles. That specific morning, he already done 27.
It's just a level of dedication that's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. And it goes way beyond daily runs. He's done these huge ultramarathons, like the Spartathlon.
Ah, yes, the Spartathlon in Greece.
That's the one. It's 153 miles. From Athens to Sparta. You're basically reenacting that ancient run by Phidippides.
And you have to finish it in under 36 hours, right? Which sounds insane.
It is insane. And the source material really details the toll it took. The first time he tried it, brutal. He was puking for like 8 hours straight.
Wow.
And he ended up quitting. He admitted later pretty bluntly that he just wasn't mentally tough enough that year.
But that failure became this huge turning point, didn't it?
Absolutely. He went back the next year, but with a completely different frame of mind. He said he was basically ready to die, if that's what took. He really internalized that ultra runner idea.
The one about if you can't run, you walk.
You can't walk, you crawl, you never ever quit. Exactly. He embodied that.
And this is where his perspective gets really interesting, I think. He says these ultra marathons, they're 100% mental.
Yeah, he talked about seeing runners who were objectively faster than him, people like himself that first year, just drop out.
While maybe slower, older runners kept going and finished.
Right. The difference wasn't physical ability at that point. It was the mental game.
Yeah.
He's totally convinced that your mindset when you start is what determines if you finish, especially for these extreme challenges.
He also talked about drawing inspiration from other absolute legends of endurance, right? Like David Goggins.
Yeah, mentioned training with Goggins for 15 years. Talked about Goggins pushing through workouts with like destroyed knees, bone-on-bone pain, needing experimental procedures, just relentless.
And that story about Cam Haynes' son doing 10,000 pull-ups.
In 24 hours.
Yeah.
Just these examples of what the mind can drive the body to do. It's almost beyond comprehension.
So, okay, running 153 miles, 10,000 pull-ups. How does that connect back to, us, to everyday life?
Well, his argument, and it's compelling, is that voluntarily making yourself uncomfortable physically.
Like pushing yourself in a run, or maybe a tough pickleball game, or doing jujitsu like he mentioned.
Exactly. Doing that makes other kinds of adversity, the non-physical stuff life throws at you, feel easier to handle, less overwhelming.
He even brought up some stats, referencing thinkers like Jonathan Haidt, suggesting exercise can be more effective than antidepressants for some people.
Yeah, linking our modern kind of sedentary lives to rising anxiety and depression. He argued that movement isn't really optional for us. Our DNA, our biology, it's still wired for it. We have to move.
So the point isn't necessarily that you need to run an ultramarathon.
Not at all. It's more about looking at someone who does something that extreme and letting it inspire you, not make you feel jealous or inadequate.
Shifting that thought from, wow, I could never do that, to something like, okay, what level of voluntary discomfort can I handle? What can I do to build my own resilience?
Exactly. That intentional exposure, it teaches you about your own limits, or maybe lack of limits. It shows you what you're made of when things get tough. And that self-knowledge is just, it's gold, really, for facing any challenge.
Okay, let's shift gears now from the intense physical world to the other side of this guest. The mentalist.
Seems like a total leap, doesn't it? But we'll see how that mental discipline, that understanding of people actually connects.
So where did this mentalism thing start for him? It wasn't always mentalism, was it?
No, it actually started with magic. Way back when he was a teenager. Got totally hooked after seeing a magician perform on a cruise ship. Said he basically stalked the guy to learn tricks.
And that became his job for a long time.
Yeah, paid his way through college, doing magic in restaurants. For 30 years, he said. Can you imagine? Night after night, table after table.
That must have been an incredible training ground for reading people, dealing with skeptical diners, having to connect instantly.
Absolutely foundational. He said that's where he really learned it. So the move to mentalism later felt kind of natural. He calls it the magic of the mind.
But he's careful not to claim, like, psychic powers, right?
Oh, completely. He frames it as reverse engineering how people think, understanding behavior. It's about reading people, using highly developed skills, not reading minds supernaturally.
And he was pretty upfront about how hard it is to learn mentalism compared to regular magic tricks.
Oh, yeah. Use some colorful language. Says you have to be willing to eat shit, basically.
Right?
Because unlike a card trick that, works pretty much every time if you do it right, mentalism effects often don't work perfectly at first. They need tweaking, refinement.
And most people just give up, go back to the safer magic tricks.
That's what he said. It takes years of pushing through those failures, that uncertainty, to get good. Real resilience needed there too, actually.
What really struck me was his philosophy behind it all. It's not just about fooling people.
No, not at all. He talked about creating memorable moments, about engineering memories.
Engineering memories. Explain that a bit more.
It's about subtly guiding how someone experiences something, and more importantly, how they remember it later. Positioning the memory.
And he had this amazing story about how he realized this, right? As a teenager.
Yeah, he did this card trick. Threw a deck at the ceiling, signed card sticks, rest fall down, standard stuff. But later, he heard people talking about it.
And they remembered it differently.
Totally differently. They didn't remember the deck falling. They just remembered the signed card appearing on the ceiling. Like magic.
Wow.
And that was the light bulb moment for him. He saw it as this, life hack.
Yeah.
If you can subtly influence what people focus on and remember.
You can shape their perception of you, highlight your strengths, manage impressions in almost any situation, not just on stage.
Exactly. A skill for all of life, really.
Yeah.
Helping people remember what you want them to and kind of gloss over the rest.
Okay, so this brings us to those demonstrations we mentioned earlier. This is where it got, pretty mind-bending for me, personally, watching the source material.
Yeah, these were the moments where you see the reading people and influencing perception stuff in action. And again, the claim was these outcomes were predicted before we even started. Sealed envelopes and everything.
It sounds like fiction, but seeing it does make you question things.
It really does challenge your assumptions about what's possible just through observation and psychology.
Okay, first one, the ATM PIN. He asked me for my PIN, which is 2020, the year I moved to Austin.
And you mentioned your wife doesn't even know it, right? And the bank assigned it. You didn't pick it.
Right. And he didn't explicitly say, your PIN is 2020. But he gave this strong impression he knew, talked about tendencies, number choices. It felt deeply unsettling, even without him saying the number.
Like he just plucked it out of your head. Even though he'd later say it's not mind reading, the effect was powerful.
Then there was the fighter prediction. He told me to think of any UFC fighter, past or present, anyone.
And you cycled through quite a few in your head.
Yeah, maybe a dozen, maybe more. I finally landed on Anderson Silva. And I specifically remembered, okay, he won his last fight.
And then the reveal from one of those sealed envelopes.
It was unbelievable. The prediction said I would think of exactly 14 fighters.
You got the number right, 14.
Exactly 14, before landing on Anderson Silva. And it also said I'd remember that Silva won his fight. The precision of predicting 14, I still can't figure that out.
That's the part that feels impossible, right? How do you predict the internal thought process like that?
Exactly. Okay, next he turned to Jamie, the producer, asked him to think of his first crush.
Right. And he guided him a bit. Asked him to count the letters in his head, watched his reactions.
Yeah, and he kind of narrowed it down, said, is it 8 or 9 letters? Jamie wasn't sure, then landed on 9 in the prediction.
Pulled from another envelope. Christine. 9 letters. And he even added the detail that she was also known as Melody from that old show, Hey Dude.
Which Jamie confirmed was all true, and he said he hadn't even thought about her in months.
Just plucked out of the recesses of memory. Wild.
Then he did one more with me. Used this setup involving a phone call, asked me to think of either my first crush or my first kiss.
And you had two different people come to mind?
Yeah. And somehow he distinguished between them, noted the crush's name was shorter 6 letters.
And the prediction from another sealed envelope, this one tied to a theme of past, present, future.
Was Amanda. 6 letters. Correct again.
It just keeps stacking up. It's layer upon layer.
Okay, the last big one was the coin flip. This was just statistically baffling. He takes out a coin.
Yeah, asks you to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Heads or tails, but in the air, right, before it lands.
Yeah. So I call tails. It lands heads. Okay.
Yep.
I call tails again. Lands heads again. Call tails again. Lands heads again. 5 times in a row, it landed heads, and I kept calling tails.
Which is already pretty unlikely, statistically. 5 heads in a row.
But the prediction from the last sealed envelope, it didn't just say I'd be wrong.
No, it was incredibly specific, wasn't it?
It said I would call tails, get heads 3 times wrong. Then I'd insist on doing just one more.
Which you did.
Which I did, and I'd get that one wrong too. So it predicted 4 consecutive wrong calls, and then it predicted another wrong call after that.
So it predicted the specific sequence of calls and outcomes, and your reaction of wanting one more try before any coin was flipped.
Exactly. The prediction happening before the event with that level of detail about my choices and the random outcome,
Yeah.
That's the part that fries your brain.
So, okay, let's address the elephant in the room. Is this guy psychic? Does he have supernatural powers?
He's adamant. No, absolutely not.
Right. He insists it all comes down to technique. Things like reading people very, very closely.
Controlling the environment, controlling the flow of information, often presenting it as just part of the entertainment.
Layering different methods together so you can't easily track how it's done, and just having this deep, practical understanding of human psychology, knowing what cues to look for, what questions to ask.
He mentioned an old book, 13 Steps to Mentalism, from the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, by Tony Corinda. Said it was foundational, even if parts are dated now, but it underlines that these are skills, learned techniques.
It's not like a magic trick that just works. It's about constant practice, refinement, staying incredibly calm under pressure. He compared the focus needed to being like a sniper.
That calm control seems key, managing the tension in the room.
So moving beyond the performance stuff, how do these skills, this mindset, apply more broadly? We talked about that too.
Yeah, like the whole topic of psychics came up.
Right. And he's pretty skeptical, isn't he? Believes many people claiming psychic powers are using similar techniques.
But for exploitation, not entertainment, which is a crucial difference.
He mentioned things like 2-person code acts.
Yeah, where performers seem to have telepathy, but it's actually based on incredibly subtle cues, verbal codes, slight touches, things the audience is conditioned not to see.
He also talked about those telepathy tapes with nonverbal autistic children. Expressed some skepticism there too.
From his perspective, as someone who pretends to read minds professionally, he sees potential methods, things like physical touch, positioning letters, slight movements, observable things that could explain the communication.
And he suggested a proper double-blind study hasn't really been done to rule those out. He was careful though, right? Said he didn't want to take away hope, but
just explain the techniques he recognizes from his own field. An explanation based on skill, not the supernatural.
And he's actually tried to teach some of these reading people skills for everyday use, hasn't he? Through his book.
Yeah, read your mind. The idea is to take these techniques, understanding body language, behavior, communication patterns, out of the entertainment context.
And apply them to improve your relationships, your work life, negotiations, making it a practical, learnable skill.
We also got into his creative process a bit. How does a mentalist come up with new material?
He described himself as a singer-songwriter type, not a cover band, meaning he creates his own stuff constantly.
Yeah, doesn't just do the standard routines everyone knows.
Yeah.
He finds ideas everywhere, running, shower, driving with no music, watching comedians, just constantly observing and creating. Needs that to stay interested himself.
There was also that fantastic story about meeting Steven Spielberg.
Oh, that was great. At Spielberg's dad's birthday party.
And even though our guest is a huge admirer, he made a point of not asking Spielberg any questions. 0.
And instead, Spielberg, this huge director, just turned it around and spent 20 minutes asking him questions.
Yeah.
Genuine curiosity.
What a lesson, right? He called the ability to truly listen and let others talk a superpower.
Such a simple but powerful insight for connection, for learning. Applies to podcasting too, I guess. Good conversation.
He even mentioned Spielberg talking about how becoming a father changed how he viewed the ending of Close Encounters. Shows how life shifts your perspective.
Yeah, the conversation went into some other interesting tangents too, didn't it?
Yeah.
Briefly touched on UAPs, UFOs.
His theory was like maybe a mix of secret government tech and possibly advanced drone probes from some ancient, maybe even Earth-based, non-human intelligence. The ultra-terrestrial idea.
And bits on the Fermi paradox. Ancient depictions hinting at strange things.
Yeah.
Even quantum physics concepts.
Schrodinger's cat. Consciousness observing reality, the empty space and atoms, hinting that future tech could seem almost godlike to us now.
Right. And quick mentions of Michael Jackson believing ideas came through him, Max Martin's hit songwriting process.
Yeah, lots of fascinating little side roads, but the main threads really kept coming back together.
Absolutely. This deep dive, it really shows how that extreme physical discipline and that intense mental focus, they're intertwined, how perception and reality can be shaped.
And how there are these powerful lessons you can pull from it all for your own life, your own growth. Change jealousy to inspiration.
Embrace some of that voluntary discomfort. Be genuinely curious about other people. Listen more.
It really underscores the power of your mindset and also makes you aware of all these subtle signals people give off, the hidden dynamics in every interaction.
Things that are right there, if you just learn how to notice them, how to listen.
So maybe something for you to think about after this. Just how much of what you perceive as reality is actually being shaped by your own mind, your own expectations.
Or, could deliberately choosing to face a little discomfort, something that pushes you slightly, actually unlock some resilience, some self-knowledge you didn't realize you possessed.
Or even, how could you maybe start using that idea of engineering memory, not manipulatively, but positively to build better connections and leave a more lasting, positive impression?
Lots to mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.